Come back from that short break, and gladly Professor Ali Zoaka is already standing by to join us all the way from Uganda, Islamic University, Uganda. A very good day to you, Prof.
Good afternoon, how are you?
Very fine. How is Uganda? How is Islamic University doing, sir?
Uganda is fine. Everything is moving on here smoothly, no problem.
All right, sir. So it's good to hear that. But let's take a look at the global African challenge, because if you say Uganda is fine, definitely on the side of debt, Uganda may not be fine, because all African countries is owing a total debt of about 1.60 trillion US dollar. But first and foremost, Prof, let me ask, why are African countries still in debt?
Well, I think thank you so much for having me on the program. For me, I think the reasons are not far-fetched. First, I don't normally subscribe to individuals who want to argue that Africa has been independent for the past 70 years, 60 years, and so on. And so therefore they should not blame their past. And for me, that for me is usually the point of departure, the past, the colonial economic structures. You see, because Africans were integrated into a world capitalist system in which they were not prepared for any particular role. The role that they were given is just to be producers of raw materials. While the industries where the raw materials are converted into finished goods are located elsewhere. And so that in itself created the problem of our development. And that is why, again, after independence, where you now have individuals who sacrificed, because the First Republic politicians, most of the countries, African countries, including some of them, that because of their posture against colonialism, were eliminated. People like Patrice Lumumba, people like Nkrumah, and several of them like that. Any African leader that wants to show that he wants to liberate his people, the next thing is that Europeans are trying to kill him. Why? They are the ones actually, benefiting from all the deception and all the institutions they set up in order to continue to exploit and dominate, the ordinary people, particularly on the African continent.
Very interesting fact.
And so for me,
go ahead, sir. Go ahead.
The departure point will be, that colonial background. Then, of course, we know that we now became just a suppliers of raw materials. That's what we are converted into. And so it's not surprising that we are not on our feet, not having industries and all that. Then we have weak institutions and governance structures that have also, because the institutions in the first place were imported. They didn't, grow from amongst or within the environment within which we are operating. So all the institutions are more what they call model, institutions. And then we are now told that we should practice democracy. All these things, it's not as if they were alien to us, but even if we were doing it, we are doing it in our own unique way. And so therefore we found that the institutions that now came out of colonialism were very weak institutions, and that is why even what we are talking about today, the issue of debts, most of the funds collected, who is going to account for these debts? Because those in government believe that the government, as if they were Europeans governing over black people. So everything about the government is a secret. If you look at it, that is part of the problem. Government business is seen as a secret. Citizens should not know. So when you collect loans from any organization, how are the loans managed? Who are the managers of those loans? You will see that you have all sorts of challenges with institutions, weak institutions, and of course the governance system is terribly bad. And so what do you find? There is poor planning systems, there is lack of transparency. The public institutions are very fragile, they cannot respond to anything from you. The only thing they know is that once people are complaining about anything, you clamp down on them. As if it's a foreign government, not a government made up of the people. And then corruption, inefficiency, and misuse of public funds reduce the impact, of course, of borrowed money. So when you are not able to understand was the money that was received, who are responsible for managing the money, to do what was it meant for? For instance, you see on Nigeria roads, this project is Sukuk. how much was borrowed from the Sukuk? Who managed the Sukuk? Why are the roads still uncompleted? Nobody's asking questions. When you ask questions, then it becomes an offense, to those of authority. I don't think that's the way to run a society. You cannot run a society successfully like that. And so for me, these are some of the, and of course, the structural adjustment program that was introduced, by the World Bank, all those have actually created and stifled, because a lot of governments in Africa were told that government has no business in business. That is these are some of the deception, that Africans have been deceived to believe that government has no business in business. If government has no business in business, then all we need to do is to create the enabling environment. And then the private sector will come. Where is the private sector in Africa? Where are they? Majority of people are farmers. So who are the people that have the capital to invest in any sector if they are not aided by the government? So you now accept line, hook and sinker, falsehood, and then you want to use it to develop. I think these are the critical issues. Now, based on that, we sold our public institutions. Most of the things that were providing us succor, all were sold and privatized. Some of them succeeded, but some have become extremely difficult to manage. Like for instance, the problem of electricity in Nigeria, have they been able to resolve that problem despite the privatization they've done? The answer is no. Because the interests of those importing generators have not been completely resolved. They have not directed them to another sector. They have not given them anything that they will do. So if all their lives they believe is to import generators, and now you are saying you want to provide electricity, you are in conflict with them. They will not accept it. So they will frustrate all the efforts of the government to ensure that people do that. So all this, and then of course the unfavorable global financial system itself. Most of the African countries borrow at high interest rates due to credit ratings and risk perceptions, because sometimes this country they may not be able to pay, so they are given credits at very high interest rates. It is only China that was giving them loans at a very low interest rate, almost at 0.05% or thereabout. Almost at they are just giving them because the Chinese wanted Africans to also develop, and so they provide them with very actually soft loans, so to say, and they don't give them the loans in cash. They give them the loans in projects, and so they finance the project virtually sometimes about 75%, then the country brings in about 25% or thereabout. There is some kind of sharing formula that they engage in, and then of course, if it's a railway, it's delivered. If it is a housing estate, is delivered. Whatever it is, the Chinese have delivered. Most of the loans collected from the West, what were they deployed into? Can they point out anything and say this is what has been done that is beneficial to the people? Apart from social programs like immunization and HIV/AIDS program, all that things that they claim they give, all the loans collected from the West to ensure that there is good governance. Have we really achieved any good governance? Look at it, Nigeria now, how many years into democracy? We are still intolerant of views. Just somebody expressing his views is not accepted once it's against the government. So you cannot, continue to, so several factors have actually created, the problem that has warranted or has led most African countries, to now begin to think that the way out is to collect loans.
Prof, I really love your submission as a way of starting this show right now. But currently, there's an ongoing IMF spring meeting in US, in Washington, D.C. right now. All central bank governors across the world are attending. All finance ministers across the world are attending. But the shocker that came out from IMF yesterday about the debt issue, IMF is calling African countries to come for restructuring, debt restructuring. Can you help us to understand what this debt restructuring is all about from your own perspective, sir?
From my own understanding of what they're talking about in terms of debt restructuring, I think what the World Bank is trying to say is that in view of the pains, of not being able to pay these debts, because of the difficulties the countries are going through, all this global economic crisis has also affected this country, and so they are not able to pay. And so therefore what they are trying to do is that they can reschedule the payment, extending the time over which debt will be repaid. So these are part of the debt restructuring. You come now for rescheduling. You come for what they also refer to as even haircuts, and the haircuts are the creditors will agree to accept less than the full amount owed. That is, those who are owing should accept. They must not get the full amount that is being owed. That means they have to do some partial write-off of some amount, so that the countries will be able to pay. These are all bids to ensure that these countries actually pay. Then debt for equity swaps. Creditors convert debt into equity in the debtors' assets or companies. So you do also some debt equity swap, and then of course debt for nature or debt for development swaps. So some bilateral multilateral creditors cancel debt in exchange for investment, environmental or social programs. Okay, so all this will actually kind of help rescheduling the debts, so that rather than those that gave the loans to lose everything, they have a way, one way or the other, to recoup back their money. And that is even what I think the Chinese were being accused of. In most parts of Africa, in fact, you hear that Chinese have taken over police station, Chinese have taken over the ports, Chinese have taken over airports and all that, which are all propaganda against the Chinese. There was nothing like that. So when you are restructuring your debt, it's just like postponing the evil day.
That's serious.
It will certainly come. Yes.
Now, on the other hand, Prof, you must have also been following the issue that most African countries who are a little bit radical have been calling for debt cancelling. Is it not better we sing the song of debt cancelling than accepting the hook, line, and sinker, this debt rescheduling or debt restructuring that IMF is asking for?
You see, I think it is not also in good faith to say you should just cancel the debts. You see, the thing is this. Those asking for the debt cancellation, most of them have not shown any form of, they are not frugal, they are not disciplined in their spendings. You see public officials, you are a debtor nation. How can you be a debtor nation and the minister will be going with an entourage of vehicles? The president will go with sometimes 60 to 100 vehicles. Of what? So when you look at this wastage, that you cannot be displaying opulence, then you come back and say you are begging for forgiveness. I don't think they will take them seriously. It's when you show our people are really in need. Look at what when Obasanjo came in, he paid off the debt. Somehow they found a way of paying up the debt, and then later again the debt started mounting again. Now they are talking about over $40 billion US.
Exactly.
That is being owed. Now, if you take Traore in 2 years has paid off his debts. It was Burkina Faso, a rich country. No, what he has done is that the resources of the country should be used for the people of the country. And how can a resource-rich continent like Africa be going to begging for what? We shouldn't be begging for anything. We are a resource-rich continent, but what have the Europeans done? They've instituted wars here and there, so we are fighting ourselves based on useless, identities, or either religious, ethnic, or whatsoever. Or some people want to stay in power forever. So you have all sorts of crises of, development. So you cannot now be going cap in hand and be begging that you should be forgiving your debt. I think the African country is rich enough, and I think for us to stand tall, in the global affairs, we should know most of these countries should be serious about managing their resources and pay off these Europeans, and they should take over the resources just like Traore has done. Traore has taken over all his resources. All the gold mining companies controlled by the French people, he has taken over. And so now the resource of the country is being used for the citizens of the country. But yet you have some Africans who have this colonial mentality, living in Paris, who are busy demonstrating that they want democracy. This is the madness, that we have within the continent. We want democracy, which has not been able to produce any. There's no any democratic country, on the African continent that you can point to that is developed, that has more than 1 million people. Which one? Apart from some small countries, 500,000 and so on, that you can talk about, that are even looked at as full democracies. Which one? All the other complex countries are in crisis and in conflict. Over what? Over the accumulation. It's not as if this crisis and conflict is for the benefit of the poor people. No. Just for some few elites, African elites, to become wealthy, to become rich.
Now,
So for me, I think they should not be talking about debt cancellation. Rather, they should even be talking about reparations. Don't forget that we were colonized, and so at the end of the day, nobody's owing anybody. Because so what we have collected so far as loans, we can look at it as our own payment of reparations, and call their bluff and say they should go to hell. Yes, because we were colonized, exploited for over 100 years. Who is going to pay for that? For that dehumanization, for that slavery and all that? Who is going to pay for it? Now, so I think we can also strike a balance. We can also argue that, look, you people have colonized us. This debt we have collected, we can't pay. And therefore, just look at it as your own payment, part payment, because it's not even the full payment. Part payment of the slavery and the colonialism that you have, subjected us to.
Prof, I will have to agree with you on that, because paying 1.60 trillion as your principal as a debt and 90 billion yearly as debt servicing is quite huge. But let's look away from that and look at African lately relationship with China. Many people also argue that this borrowing, this loan we are collecting from China is like another route to new imperialism. Do you share in that light?
No, see, maybe because of my bias towards China, I may not share that. Yeah, because for me, I look at what the Chinese are doing from different perspectives. Politically, people may be complaining that there may be some elements of repression and all that. But in terms of development, if the leaders of your country are able to convert your country from an underdeveloped country to, in fact, most countries on the world today, China is already in 2050 in terms of development. So if I'm in a country like that, I will not complain. Because for me, basic necessities of life can easily be met. So if a government that is so dedicated, that has, within a very short period of time, was able to grow its economy, because while US is busy using the same, because they were trading, with the US, and both of them were making money. While China concentrated on human development, US was using its own money, fight wars, instigate wars, topple governments, sponsor terrorism, all that. Now they are broke. They are not coming to say they are going to deal with China. Chinese were rather looking at business, developing themselves, and they are ready, because that's a 5,000-year civilization. So, and they've resisted. Even despite the fact that at one time some palaces in China and even in Nigeria were attacked around the same time, around 18, something, and they were looted. And most of those loots are still being found in some of these European countries. So for me, China is a different ballgame. I know a lot of people are complaining that they are trying to get African countries indebted. But you see, in the case of China, what they are doing is this: you have these debts are provided not in cash. The debts are not in cash. The debts are coming in kind, and the facilities are actually provided. For instance, if we take the Kaduna Abuja railway line, is there, and every day they're supposed to be making some income. So what will stop them from repaying the debts? Nothing, apart from the fact that because of some sabotage, you can see, and that is sometimes some of the things that happen within the country. You begin to wonder, why are things happening like that? Why should that railway line be targeted and attacked just to discourage? Now they cannot. They have to reduce, the number of, the times they move between Kaduna and Abuja. If not so, in the past they move Kaduna Abuja about 3 times or even 4 times in a day. Now they have to reduce it to about 2 or even once in a day. That will also create problems for the repayment. You see, because this is a very good business that was going on, and somehow, because these terrorists are being sponsored by the West, clearly, a senator in the American Parliament already said that they are even funding Boko Haram, so all these terrorists are being funded by them. So this conflict we are seeing is beyond our own, understanding. It has several dimensions. While some groups may be thinking they are bringing their brothers and so on to come and fight for them in the country, there is also a bigger and more, picture to destabilize and destroy the country. So the Chinese, for me, most of what they have provided can be touched. There are assets that can be felt, that can be touched. If you talk about airport remodeling, for instance, the remodeling of the Abuja International Airport, the numbers, it is there. And every day there's traffic flow. People are going in and out, and money is being received. So why should they be unable to pay? So I think for me, most of these other arguments that they are trying to recolonize, there's no any recolonization, except we are saying that we are incapable of governing ourselves, which is what most of the Europeans are saying, that blacks are incapable of governing themselves. But we have seen that it is not that it is blacks, it's just that in every race there are bad and evil people. And so therefore, when the evil ones are the ones in charge, they can't do anything. They only take care of themselves. But if once you have a leader that is selfless, like what the young man in Burkina Faso is doing, he's a selfless leader. And that's why he will go to the farm and meet the farmers, he will go and meet the workers sweeping on the streets. As the president of the country, even in the form of populism, have you seen any governor, any person? They are busy sleeping. How can they go? Because they are busy planning even in the night. They cannot do anything during the daytime, apart from just pretending that they are in office, doing nothing. So for me, the Chinese as a model, I think if we can even copy, that will help us.
Exactly. If you can copy the good side of it, or it will help us. But going forward and taking a look at the way forward for African countries, particularly debt issue, for IMF or World Bank, they are calling for debt restructuring, debt rescheduling, debt technicality aspect of it. But for African leaders, from your perspective as a scholar of African studies, as well as someone who understands this debt issue about Africa, what is your advice to African leaders? You are giving an example of the Ibrahim Traore of the Burkina Faso. But what else can African leaders do in this regard, particularly those ones that are practicing this democracy and they also want good things to come for their people?
Nothing will come out of this democracy. What they need to do really is to find a way of saying that they must be open. You see, if they can even just implement good governance indices, transparency, accountability, inclusiveness, equity. Once you can sit down and say, look, we must be transparent, we must be accountable, we must have inclusion, people must participate in the governance. Whether it's a democracy or dictator, whatever it is, if people are participating, it means people are being carried along. And then, because you alone cannot develop the country, you need the support of the people. Now look at it, in Burkina Faso, it was women that gathered money and gave Traore that he should please use it to feed the people fighting in the war front. Since Boko Haram was fighting, since Nigerian army has been fighting Boko Haram, have you ever heard that maybe some rich people have come together, or even Nigerians have come together to support with 10 naira, 20 naira, so that they can gather and feed the military? Have you ever heard anything like that? The answer is no. So when you don't have any, buy-in in whatever you are doing, if there is no buy-in, then you cannot get anywhere. And so we have to look inward. Our development cannot come from outside.
Exactly.
We must develop from inside. That's what the Chinese have done. They develop from inside. And you'll be shocked the way they use their resources in China. Because I have a friend, professor, that retired, just last year, and she was telling me that, look, she has enrolled into a program where they have not been sent to another district that is not as developed as the other ones, so that they can contribute to the development of that place, irrespective of their whatever language they are speaking. That is not important. What is important is that it is their country. And so unless we begin to look at things from a different angle, but if we say we are going to continue to follow this European line of thinking, European line of development, we are not going to go anywhere. Once we cannot sit down in our country, build our country, develop our country, build hospitals and everything that we can get, we have the best medical doctors, we have the best teachers, virtually everything, we have everything. But the resources to work are not there. The right compensation for the workers is not there. So we cannot just continue paying politicians sitting down in the morning 3 times a week, millions of naira, while those who are going to work on a daily basis, even enable the country to work, are collecting peanuts. We are not serious. So we cannot continue like that. We have to look at these things critically. And those in the political class must sacrifice. The people you are supposed to be serving the people, not that the people are supposed to serve you. It's a two-way. You are elected to go and serve. That's what is the thing. You are elected to go and serve. Now you turn yourself into masters, having been elected. You cannot go anywhere with that. You must they must convert themselves back to servants, to serve the people. And then things can change. But in terms of borrowing, I don't think that is the way out. We must look inwards. Let's look inwards. We have all the resources, we have all the capital and human resources to develop our country by ourselves. It will shock you that a lot of people are really marvel when they go to Abuja. Most Africans, when they go to Abuja, they see that Abuja was developed by blacks. They say, so Africans can do a wonder like this. So you can just imagine who can replicate this around by using our resources correctly. Everywhere will be okay. And people will live in a decent environment. And all this, turbulence that we're seeing all over the place will die down. But when you make people hungry, they can't go to farm. They have been driven away from the farms, and most of these things because of political differences. We can't go get anywhere with all these things. We need to really, show some concern for our country and interest in the development of our country.
Exactly.
And that is the only way our country will develop and become the real giant that we are.
Exactly. A real giant that we are, and a real giant that Nigerian desire to be, particularly for those of us who believe that Nigerian can be great, and African can also come out of this debt obligation trap that it has found itself. Prof, I can't thank you enough for coming on the show today. Thank you so much for being part of the show today, sir.
Thank you so much for the opportunity. Thanks.
All right, so we look forward to future engagement with you, particularly as we'll be counting down to the second year of President to have you guests to intervene and interrogate some of the issues of Nigerian governance so far.